Welcome back, everyone, to Stay Tuned. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. I am one half of what makes this show so incredible. I am Tim.
And I'm Tom. Thanks for wishing me a happy Mother's Day, Tim.
Shut up. Do you know how many kids? Did you call your mother today?
Not yet. My mom is actually not working, but she volunteers at a as an usher at a local theater. So she is actually kind of working today. So I'm gonna call her tonight.
Nice. I'll probably be doing the same thing. So.
And no, I didn't forget, Mom.
All right. So how's your week been?
It's good. This week was pretty good. Not too much going on. It is my birthday in a week and a day, so I'm looking forward to that. Yeah.
He is excited.
Partially because I have no idea what's going to happen next week here, but my parents are coming in town next week and stuff, so it'll be fun. So what is it? Payback. WWE Payback is coming up in a week, so nothing really going on this week, but next Sunday is going to be really awesome. For sure.
I cannot wait. I mean, Saturday is going to be a lot of fun. Then Sunday is going to be awesome. And then it's back to work on Monday. So this weekend's going to be great. I'll be in Pennsylvania this whole week for work. So I'm looking forward to the weekend already. All right?
Amish country.
All right. So the topic for this week is hard and difficult games. Now, I think most people in modern era today think of a hard or difficult game. Let me just fix that real quick. When they think of like a hard or difficult game, the first game that comes to mind is going to be like Dark Souls, or the new release. What was that, like 3 months, 4 months now? No, 2 months. Bloodborne.
It was March. I'm pretty sure it was March, if not late April, something like that. But yeah, those are like the well-known hard games that.
Yeah. I mean, like
for a while. We
Demon
haven't had any
Souls,
hard games.
Yeah, Demon Souls for the PS3, and then Dark Souls came out for the 360 and the PS3, and just pretty much was just punishing. But we're going to look all the way back. We're going to look back at the 8-bit era, the 80s, late, 80s, 90s, and today. Isn't that what that radio station says? Something like that. But,
yes, the 80s, 90s, and today.
But anyways, when I think of, hard games, I think of the Nintendo. So the difference between now and then, more so then, is that the technology that they had. They didn't have, they weren't able to make games that lasted like 12 to 14 hours. Most of the games, if you go back and play them today, knowing exactly what to do without any cheat codes or even glitching the levels, you can usually finish a game in like 30, 40 minutes.
Oh, yeah. Contra and Super C and all those, which we'll be talking about for sure. But, like, Super C, if I'm playing well, I can beat that game in, like, less than 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Which is ridiculous. And, like, you can do that for pretty much all the Contra games. Like, if you know what you're doing, it's about a 20-minute experience.
Yeah. But if you don't know what you're doing, you'll spend hours trying to figure out what you're doing to get to that point.
Right.
To where you can beat the game in 20 minutes.
It takes dozens of hours to get to the point where you can beat the game in 20 minutes. Yeah.
But yeah, so we talked about Contra and Super C. So that was like, when I think about the first games I ever played, I think Contra was one of my first 3 or 4 games I ever played as a kid. It's one that really stands out really well, because I remember the blue and the red guy. I thought of Rambo the whole time, which actually kind of funny is that him and Arnold Schwarzenegger were pretty much like the main guys that were the inspiration for the game. But I just thought of Rambo, the bandana, the no shirt, muscles, shooting big guns, Contra, and the old Konami code. What is it? Up, down, down, left, right, BA start or BA select start. If you're doing 1 or 2 players, a lot of people use that code, and I used it as a kid, mainly when I was with my friend and my cousin, because they knew it. I didn't know it because it was too long for me to remember. I just didn't care to remember.
Right.
But not knowing the code helped me with that game a lot, because I took it very seriously at that point, to where like, oh my god, I can only die like 3 times and then I have to start all over. Whereas a lot of my friends were like, I got 30 lives, I can just pretty much try and snowplow through this the best I can.
Yeah, you can just kind of make stupid decisions and plow your way through it.
Yeah, but not actually having the code, I feel like that really helped me personally. And I feel like I enjoyed the game a lot more.
Grow as a human.
It helped me grow as a human.
Yeah, it's a sense of accomplishment. Like, not many people can say that they beat Contra without the code.
Yeah. I mean, I've actually done more things now. Like, I have I still have the game memorized to a point where like if I sat down and played it for like 20 minutes, I could eventually remember all the patterns, the few ones that I've forgotten for bosses. And I've went through the entire game with the pea shooter, and I think I died twice the entire time. So I finished the game with one continue, died twice. I finished the game with like 5 or 6, extra lives or whatever. But I'm not as adept with Super C as I am with Contra, though. I think Super C is more your territory, isn't it?
Yes, Super C is my game. Like I've got it down where when I was playing it a lot, I knew where everything was. I knew when to jump, when to duck, when to do everything. I knew all the patterns. Like I could beat the first. I think there are only like 7 or 8 levels in that game, and I could beat like the first 5 without dying.
Jesus.
On it, like consistently.
I always have trouble on the jungle mission. The jungle mission always gets me. It's like
the best part. The best
4.
part about that mission is if you're stuck, you just duck down in the water, and nothing can hurt you.
Nothing can hit you.
And then, but you kind of got to go through the level at the same pace every time, or else stuff starts going crazy with like the enemy spawns and all that. Depending on where you are on the screen. So, I was the same way with Super C.
And then
I'm horrible at the original Contra.
Oh,
I don't know what it is.
Great. I'm
really good at that I'm horrible at that game.
And then other games for Nintendo. I mean, like the Zelda games were pretty. They weren't really difficult. They were
Zelda 2 is really
Zelda 2,
really
but that was But Zelda 1 wasn't really difficult as much as it was like cryptic. But if you had like an episode or like an issue of Nintendo Power that had Zelda stuff in it, you were good to go. Like you could pretty much get through like the first like 4 or 5 dungeons no problem. I never played Zelda as a kid. At least that Zelda, the Legend of Zelda,
the original. Yep.
Or Zelda 2. What is it? Link's Adventure. I never played either of those. I played them as a kid because I remember the gold card. I thought it was like the coolest thing that there was a card of gold, even though it wasn't really like real gold. Even though I thought it was as a kid. My cousin fooled me. But you're pretty gullible when you're when you're like 5 or 6. All right.
Yeah. You can you start to think things that are kind of weird when you're a little kid. Just real quick. So the Rugrats game for PlayStation 1.
Oh god.
When I was a little kid, terrified me because only one part of the Rugrats game terrified me because the music in the basement was super creepy because like Tommy's dad is making like clown toys down there, so it's all weird and circusy. So,
Wow.
Just to continue on with I'm a huge baby.
That just happened. Happened.
Scared of the Rugrats game as a child.
But sticking with I don't even know where to go from there now. Sticking with the 8-bit era, other amazing games. Like even though these games are really hard, they're still considered like amazing for their time. And still today, like Mega Man, pretty much any Mega Man game is still fucking amazing today. Castlevania 1 and 3 were really difficult. 2 was it was Castlevania 2. People
it was different.
Yeah, it's pretty much like Legend of Zelda 1, Legend of Zelda 2, like, and then if you look at the third game in both the series, on Nintendo and Super Nintendo, they go back to the original formula. Like this is a good formula for this game, but we wanted to try something different. It didn't work out, so now we're going back. If games have there's more test markets and stuff today. There's more tried and true methods. So, like if Call of Duty tried to become like an RPG, like a role playing game like The Witcher, that would never happen because they've learned to stick to the tried and true methods, whereas back then they didn't. So that's why those games were so different. But Castlevania 1 and 3 were really, really difficult. And one game that I still have never beaten, and I have probably sunk like 20, 30 hours into, is the original Ninja Gaiden. I cannot beat that game. I got it on the Wii and the Wii U virtual consoles.
That's exactly what I did.
I've sunk hours into it. I played it as a kid, but it was just more of like, Nintendo, yay, slashing, I'm a ninja, I'm cool. But I never tried to beat the game. Then, today I'm like an adult.
God, it's so hard.
And it's sad to say that, like, 20 plus years later, I'm still trying to beat this game every so often, and I can't.
Yeah, that game is ridiculous.
And I've never played any of the others because I can't beat the original, so I don't feel like I want to play the others because they're going to be worse.
Oh, yeah. Like, that game is so fun, but it is so tough.
Yes, it is.
And, like, watching people go through it, if you know, like, certain item combinations and stuff, or, like, certain timings, you can just kill all the bosses in, like, one hit each, which is absurd because the bosses appear to have unlimited health and you have, one hit and you're dead, essentially.
Well,
I think I've made it. I think there's, like, think like World 5-3 is the last one,
Yeah,
and
but
I know I've made it to
I've
five
never.
two,
I've made it to 5-1 or 5-2, but I
and
couldn't.
that's only
There's a
because the
couple of
Wii has save states. If the Wii did not have
yeah.
save states, there was no
No way
way
you'd
I
make
would be
it.
even close to that. No, not at all.
So then, yeah, I think I made it to like 5-1, 5-2, and
Yeah.
there's like a couple of platforms you have to jump on with enemies, and I just could never figure out how to do
There's
it.
like football players in that game.
Yeah,
They look like football players, and they just stand on the edge and they just dock you off, and
yeah.
it's real cheap.
So, any other games on the NES or I guess the Sega Master System that you can think of that were
Uh,
extremely difficult?
so it's, I mean, Ghosts and Goblins
Yeah, yeah, Ghosts and Goblins.
is
We
on
talked about that
NES.
the
I
other
mean, it's
day.
also on Super Nintendo and stuff, but
I never played
like
those
that
as a
game,
kid. I played those later as a teenager, and I really enjoy them. And
yeah,
there is a lot of challenge though. It's pretty
those are
difficult.
insane. Like, there's just stuff like coming out of the ground all the time. Like, they're just enemies appearing out of nowhere. Those games
Yeah,
are ridiculous. But yeah, but Contra
redonkulous.
and Ninja Gaiden and Mega Man are kind of like
The
the
pinnacle
three.
of yeah the
Yeah, the pinnacle
Holy
of
Trinity.
these games are hard, but they are
yeah.
at the same time good games.
They are very
like other games are,
satisfying.
yeah, other games are hard, but they're just like horrible.
Yeah,
They're just horrible games with terrible like jumping and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, those games are actually designed well and they feel good to play, but they're hard as balls.
yeah. And then we look at the Super Nintendo. Of course, you got Contra 3,
Yes.
which is
One
my
of the best
favorite.
games ever.
Yeah, my favorite Contra personally.
Me too.
What else is on there?
Because you can hold two guns and go like this.
just you just want to have your hands up in the air, right?
I do that a
Uh,
lot when I'm playing that game.
Super Ghouls and Ghosts was on the
Yep.
Super Nintendo. Castlevania 4, which was actually a lot easier than the other ones, but that was for different reasons. The you could actually control your character's whip better than anything
Yeah, that's
else.
kind of cool.
But
I enjoyed that at the time.
trying to think what other Super Nintendo games were actually out there.
Mega
that
Man
were
X.
really hard. Yeah, I think Mega Man's just like going to be like a common theme if there's ever a
Yeah.
Mega Man game.
Yep.
You know, rest in peace for that series, but maybe Mighty Number
It's
9
probably
will
a
be
good thing though.
yeah, Mighty Number 9 will hopefully be really really good. Sega Genesis wise, Contra Hardcore, of course, another Contra game
Yeah.
that is extremely extremely difficult. God,
I
Super
never really
Nintendo,
played much Genesis, so I can't really.
Yes, Genesis
Can't
for
really
me
comment
was Mortal Kombat and Earthworm Jim and like Vertex Guy or something like that.
Earthworm Jim was hard. I really liked the TV show for Earthworm
Uh-huh.
Jim. Like, my dad and I still reference that show because we just loved it. How stupid and crazy it was. But yeah, that game was really hard. I remember I had a demo of it on the PC, and like I couldn't beat that first level.
Yeah,
Like when I first started playing, it took me so many tries, so many tries to beat the first level of Earthworm Jim. But that, I mean, that's how games were back then. You know, they were lots of
Yeah, they
lots
were-
of difficult platformers and things like that, and a lot of games that were designed pretty much as arcade games that were designed to kill you so you could put more quarters into the
yeah,
machine.
yeah, and just keep playing because I mean, then you look at that's what we were talking about before, like the whole like the 40-minute to like the 8-hour difference.
Right.
You know what we're used to today, pretty much. I mean, if you ever watch any episode of the Angry Video Game Nerd, he talks about how some games are just ridiculously hard that shouldn't be that hard, but they are hard. But they're
Right.
really some of them are really really good, and he's not going to knock them for that compared to like a crappy game that's hard just because of the mechanics. But I think Super Nintendo doesn't really have. I can't really think of too many hard games that I played on the Super Nintendo, minus like Contra. Those like Contra was another game like when I was like in my heyday of playing Contra 3, I could usually finish it on normal in less than like 30 minutes usually. Like no continues, just 4 or 5 lives used to finish it, and I was done. But that game had to be ridiculously hard just to make up for that.
Right. Yeah. It was supposed to take your lives.
Yeah,
but-
whereas like Super Mario World was just a long game that
right.
it had some challenge, but the challenge wasn't too great, but it was more trying to figure out how to get to the next level or whatever. You muted your mic. No, I still can't hear you. Waiting on Tom. I feel like that's gonna be a common theme. I hear
No?
something. I can hear you now.
Okay. Well, anyway, so Mario games were hard, but that was because I was really impatient as a kid. Like, I don't know about you, but I would always run everywhere in Mario
Hmm.
and just try and run and jump as far as I could, and it killed me every single time. Like getting, once you get past like the first level, it just kills you every time.
Yeah.
Um, but other games that were hard on there that, and part of it too was like how difficult you made the games were like the side-scrolling beat 'em ups, like Streets of Rage and Final
Yeah.
Fight. But like more specifically, uh, my friend Mike and I, that my friend Mike grew up down the street from him. He was my best friend growing up. Like we would always play like Ninja Turtles 4, Turtles in Time, Sunset Riders, and this game King of Dragons, which was like a medieval like wizards and warriors kind of game.
Mhm.
And those games were so hard, and but we would just play them all the time. And he had them on Super Nintendo, and we would just play those for
Yeah.
hours and hours and hours. And then we finally beat them. And then going back to them later, we played them on emulators.
Not that hard.
Yeah, it wasn't
Not
that
that
hard.
hard.
I mean, we only played them on emulators because we couldn't find the cartridges anymore. We're not
Well, it's-
pirates. But
It's kind of nice though when you look back at those old games and how difficult you remember them as a kid.
yeah,
And then you go back and play as an adult just because of how much we've grown as gamers throughout time, and what we know to be
Right.
hard now is not nearly as hard. Like the stuff from back then that was like really ridiculously difficult isn't hard at all.
or just using your brain.
Yeah.
Like you're just like, oh, why did I think that I could always jump over this little area when clearly I couldn't? Like, why did I always try and take the shortcuts in all these
Yeah.
levels? And it's fun going back to those games, but like that King of Dragons and Sunset Riders though, still going back to those are really hard.
Yeah, I had a
Like-
lot of the what was it? Final Fight 2. I think I played a lot. Was
Yeah.
really good though.
Yes, I love those games. Love them.
So then, what was after the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis? There was the PlayStation and the 64. PlayStation. I mean, I immediately think of Resident Evil, Silent Hill, mainly just like kind of like the Contra syndrome, I guess. Like the first playthrough is really hard, but then like you're trying to kill all the enemies, you're trying to find every clue, you're searching every single room. But once you figure out what to do, the subsequent playthroughs become easier and easier till eventually the game is trivial to beat.
Where you can run through the game multiple times in that 12-hour period that it
Yeah.
took you originally.
Yeah, whenever the first time you beat it, it took you like 13 hours, and you're like, that's a great game. And then you go back, you're like,
Right.
it only took me like an hour and 2 hours and 25 minutes this time. What happened?
And
Oh,
I
that's
didn't even
right.
use any guns.
Yeah, and I knew where to go. But if I went back and played the original Silent Hill, I would not have any idea what to do because I only beat that game like twice, and it's
Nice.
still extremely difficult to me. Yeah,
I've never played
you should.
that game.
You should definitely
Well,
play them.
I don't know, like part of me wants to, but the other part of me is like
I'm good. I'm
kind of
good.
afraid.
Good.
But yeah. But PlayStation 1 for me, like I didn't really play any real games on there until I was older. So again, I played Rugrats on there.
Nice.
Another game that gave me a lot of difficulty as a kid was Toy Story 2. But that was also just because that's not a very good game, and it's really hard to jump
Control.
and stuff and control in that game, which is, I think, part of the difficulty of some of those games is how horrible the controls are. Now, granted, like Resident Evil and Silent Hill, because I assume Silent Hill has like a similar kind of control
They do.
scheme. Like
Yeah.
they were made that way on purpose, and like we talked about in the Resident Evil episode, like I loved it, going back to it even now. But like that Toy Story game, man, trying to run in a 3D space with either the D-pad or the horrible PlayStation analog
Yes.
sticks
Those
was
were
just
terrible.
so difficult.
The analog sticks were pretty much like a D-pad that you could just move in different directions. Like it
Yeah,
didn't
that
really do
wasn't-
anything.
Yeah, it was a D-pad that like just didn't hurt when you were trying to play a game where you had to actually control in 3D.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't and then I had a Digimon game because I love that kind of stuff, and that
Okay.
might be like I'm sure if I went back to it now, I would know what to do, but when I had that game, I had no idea what I
Yeah.
was doing.
See, I think of
It's just like, oh, my Digimon died. I don't know why.
what was it? The some of my favorite PlayStation 1 games that were hard as well, besides obviously Resident Evil and Silent Hill.
Right.
Uh, one game I never beat even the first level on was Spec Ops. Like, I remember buying it because it was like $10, and there was a couple of guys on the
Yeah.
front with like a gun. I was like, I'm gonna buy this game. It'd be really fun. And I never
What
beat the
am I
first
doing?
level. Even like I
Right.
went back to it because I still had it like 5 years after I bought it when I was like 16. I still couldn't beat it.
Good.
Like it was just ridiculous.
That's
And then
awesome.
also Siphon Filter was really good, and that game wasn't like it wasn't impossible hard, but it was hard enough to where like you would get upset because you died a lot to like
Yeah.
random crap, I guess. And then
Right. Yeah. And like I feel like there really aren't like a lot of the games from PlayStation 1 and like N64, I feel like they're not really known for being
yeah,
difficult in the way that like Mega Man and
they're
Ninja
more
Gaiden and Contra
more of
are.
like the
Is
controls
because
are difficult.
right, because it was such an awkward, weird phase for video games where everything was
Yeah,
like kind of going 3D, but the consoles really weren't meant for it. And so like you really couldn't get any, you had hard games, but it wasn't like they were designed well and all that.
yeah.
It was just because it's like, how do I control this person with this controller that's got three prongs and there's a D-pad on one side, and then there's like a weird analog stick that always breaks in the middle, and then I control the camera with like the C buttons, like. Really, a lot of those games just weren't very good
Yeah.
because they were just hard because the controller was awful and we were trying to get used to 3D.
And sometimes we're still not. Some games are still just as bad as they were
Yeah,
back then, like,
right.
10, 15, 16 years ago.
Yeah.
So then, anything else? 64. I didn't play many 64 games. Like,
Yeah.
I had a PlayStation 1, so.
Yeah, I only played 64 at like friends' houses and stuff,
Yeah, I
so
mean, like,
nothing really difficult.
I
Like lots of
owned.
Mario Kart, Smash Brothers,
Yeah, I
stuff.
owned a 64, but I mean, I had, like, the Donkey Kong 64, Mario 64,
Right.
uh, Mario Party, like all like the basic Nintendo like necessity games. I didn't really go outside the box and pick up anything that was weird or odd, I guess.
Yeah.
So, and then of course my first Final Fantasy was Final Fantasy 7, and I thought that game was ridiculously hard. But
Yeah.
that was also because I didn't know what I was doing. I think that
Yeah.
was my first RPG as well, so that was
Yeah. However, those old RPGs are a lot harder
yeah, than they are today.
than new games, and part of that is like, you aren't able to save anywhere. You're not able to, there isn't as much
There's not a
exposition in the
there's not a
games.
checkpoint after every single fight.
Yeah, there's not, and that kind of goes to like the evolution of games from like a bunch of nerdy kids that are all getting beat up because they're talking about playing video games to like literally every person I know plays a video game
Yeah.
now almost.
It's almost
And like
uncommon. It's more uncommon to find a house that does not have
right,
a video game system than ones that do.
right, exactly. And so games have gotten easier as a result of that, so that more people can play them. But
Yeah.
like Final Fantasy 4 or 2,
Yeah.
on the Super Nintendo is a much harder game than like Final Fantasy 13 was. And part of that is, too, is they just made it more difficult, less item drops, less potions, all that kind of stuff. Like I remember playing Final Fantasy 4, and it was like the last boss, I had to grind maybe 10, 15 levels, and it took like an hour at least to do one level, to grind one level, just because you're so high level anyway.
Yeah.
And games required that kind of stuff. So yeah, RPGs used to be a lot harder.
Yeah, a lot
They were
harder than they are
ridiculous.
today. But like we said, that comes with just like the evolution of
Yeah,
games,
it comes
which
with time.
I'm sure we'll be talking about in another episode in the future. I'm sure at some point.
Yep.
So then, moving on to what was next: the PlayStation 2, the Xbox, the GameCube. Trying to think, I can't really think of very much. Like Final
One of-
Fantasy X was great. It wasn't hard. It was hard,
No.
but it was more like it was easy until the end, and then there was like this like weird like like ability curve that just like went straight up that
Yeah.
I found really difficult when you got to like fighting Sin, and it was kind of ridiculous, but it was satisfying still. Like you would challenge yourself to beat it, and then eventually you would just beat it. So like, but if you planned ahead and you knew what was coming, you could beat it the first try. But
Yeah.
as a teenager, I probably died like 20 times, and I eventually was like, okay, I got to rethink something, and then I went back and changed a couple of things, and I was golden. But
Nice. Yeah, so I only had a GameCube at this time. Um, and one of the hardest games I've ever played, and it always shows up on like the hardest games list, is F-Zero GX.
never played it, so
Oh my goodness. Like all the F-Zero games are hard, but this one is insane. Like it's just that you're going so fast. There's like 30 people on a racetrack. It's what Captain Falcon's from.
yeah, I know
If
that
people
much.
don't know, but
Yeah.
like you're in these like space cars on these space tracks, but like the tracks are like winding and looping and there are jumps and there's like no railings whatsoever. So you fall off the side and like if you hurt your car enough, you'll just blow up and you'll have to start over from the beginning of the race.
Yeah,
And like the one on Super Nintendo was hard, but
it
it
wasn't
wasn't
nearly as
nearly
hard.
as fast. Part of the difficulty comes from it's just so fast. Like that game is one of the fastest racing games I've ever played, probably the fastest. Like the N64 one wasn't as fast, and the graphics weren't as crazy, so it's not like you could just see stuff flying past you all the time. But with the GameCube one, it was just absurd. Like I had the game, and I think I got like maybe a couple of races into the single player, and I just
Stop
couldn't
playing.
beat it. I had to stop. It was just too hard. Like I had heard, I had Nintendo Power then. They were like, "Yeah, this game's really hard." I didn't quite understand what that meant because I really didn't play a ton of hard games. Like I played them from the Nintendo, but even then, like I didn't play them all that much. Like that
Yeah.
was probably the first hard game that I ever got, and holy moly, was that thing hard! That game was ridiculous. But then a game that I know you've played is Beautiful Joe,
Yeah, I love that game.
side-scrolling action game. So that one is, on the one hand, you can make it incredibly easy. If you play on easy, it'll give you like, you have your
Yeah.
special powers as Joe, where you turn into Beautiful Joe, and you can slow down time, speed up time, do some other tricks. And like on the easy difficulties, it's easy to fill up that meter so that you can use all your special tricks and kill the bosses and all that.
Yeah.
And you have a bunch of continues and extra lives and things. But on the like hard and very hard difficulties, which is what you needed to play the game on and beat the final boss in order to actually like get to the final stage and beat the game, that game was so ridiculously hard. I put dozens and dozens of hours into that to finally beat it. But that is one of the best, most underrated games
It
that
was
I've
great.
ever played.
When I played,
It's
I think
one of my favorite games ever.
I can't remember if I played it on the game. Did it only come out on GameCube? I think I played it on PS2.
It came out on PS2.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, because I owned a PS2 and an Xbox, and like when I think of hard games on those systems, I can't really like Crazy Taxi was hard, but it wasn't. But it was like a
That was an
fun
arcade game, though.
game that was
Yeah.
like like playing on the controller. Of course, you just press start. You don't have to insert a quarter because that would be
Right.
that'd be ridiculous. Or I'm sure today that with live DLC on games, I'm surprised they don't do that. Like here's a free to play game, but if you want to play it, it costs you 50 cents every time you want to play it.
Don't even talk about that.
Because it's gonna happen. It's gonna
Well,
happen.
they
I'm
kind
telling
of
you.
did that with that 360. What they call it, the live arcade, with like the Atari games and stuff.
Oh yeah.
I'm so glad that didn't work out because that could have been real bad.
But yeah, I can't think of too many like ridiculously hard games in that era. I think that was like more the transition to easier games. I mean, like of course you still
Yeah.
had like Silent Hill 2 and 3 were just really hard but really fun. Once again,
Yeah.
satisfying to finish, but the goal never felt like it was too far out of reach to where you couldn't actually get it.
Right.
But
Another game that I liked a lot that I found incredibly hard was Metal Arms Glitch in the System, which is like another
didn't play that one.
obscure third-person shooter game. It was on the PS2, Xbox, and the GameCube, but it was hard because like the enemies took a lot of damage. Like you were this little robot and you're just a huge smartass, which was it was a pretty funny game. You're a robot taking on the bad robots and trying to free your friends and stuff. But that was a really good game, but it was exceptionally hard. Just because there were so many enemies being thrown at you, and like you had all these different weapons, but they really had their own like time and place where you needed to use them. Like, some games you have a shotgun and you can kind of hit people from a range and kill them quickly. No, like this thing, if you are not standing that far away from something with the shotgun,
It's
you are
not
not
gonna
going
work.
to hit it, period. Yeah, it's a really good game, another underrated one, but that was a pretty difficult game.
So now we move on to what is it? 360 and PS3 already. Wow, that's good pace.
Yeah.
Uh, Obviously we talked about it before. Dark Souls. This is where Dark Souls
Yeah.
started. I never played Dark Souls until the. I played it on PC,
Right.
but it wasn't because I didn't want to play the game. It just wasn't my forte of a type of a game. Like I remember people just, whenever this game came out, it just kind of like I was like, oh, there's a new game. Okay, whatever. I just let it go.
Right.
But whenever it came out, man, I remember seeing so many posts on YouTube. Pretty much like any gaming website was talking about how relentless and hard this game was. But I thought it was like that piqued my interest enough to where I ended up buying it on PC. A couple months later, I got it for like a
Right.
Steam sale for like $10 on like a $50 game or $60 game. And I played it. I was like, yeah, this is ridiculously hard, and I'm done. That's pretty much what happened. I
Right.
mean, like,
Yeah.
I fought like the first boss, and it felt like it had that old feel, like we talked about for Mega Man Contra, to where like the goal wasn't so far out of reach, but it was hard enough to where when you did it, it felt great.
Right.
And this was like the revival of like the Nintendo age for the modern age to me. I'm not sure
Yeah.
if you agree or disagree.
Yeah, this is Demon Souls was probably and then Dark Souls kind of even jump started it more. Were the games that uh, brought the whole difficult games back into back into the forefront.
Yeah.
I remember when I was before Demon Souls even came out, I was listening to some podcasts, and there was one of them where they were talking. This one guy was like talking about, yeah, I got this weird game from Japan. It's called Demon Souls, and everyone's all obsessed with it. And it's like, it's super hard, but it's super rewarding. You kill enemies and you gain these souls, which is your currency. But every time you die, you lose all your souls, and it takes away half your health until you can go reclaim them. If you can reclaim them, if you
Yep.
die again before you get back to your souls, you'll lose them for good. And I was like, man, that game sounds crazy. And at the time, I didn't have a PS3, so I didn't really get to play it. But then I ended up getting Dark Souls after it came out, because Demon Souls came out and like sold a couple 100,000 copies, which for some really weird, obscure Japanese game was pretty good at the time.
Yeah, I remember reading about it in a magazine, and it was pretty much like you could leave hints for other players that
Yeah,
would be like, go left at the next fork or you die. And like people would go
Yes.
left and they would die because people would lie to them.
right. Yeah, there's a guy at the very beginning of that game where it's like and this was kind of like the classic thing that they always talked about, was like you'd go up to this guy and he's like the first human that you see that doesn't attack you, and there's a clue on the ground. One of them says kill him, he's bad, and the other one says like no, leave him, he's a good guy. And you can't really tell. Like if you kill him you get a weapon, but then all these people start coming after you.
Yeah.
And it was just like, what the heck? Like, how do I know what's going on? Just like you said, like, oh, go left. If you go right, you die. But then you go left and you die. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's like,
Who do
it
I
was such
trust?
a trolling game. Like, it was the ultimate troll game. And it was also just super, it was obscure. Like, especially Demon Souls, because Dark Souls and Dark Souls 2 and Bloodborne kind of set you down a path. And you can kind of diverge from it, but it all kind of leads to the end of the game. Like Demon Souls, you beat the first level and you wake up and you're just in this church, and you can go to like all kinds of different levels. And it's like the actual order in terms of like difficulty isn't the same as the order in which they
Yeah.
appear in the church. Like there are like 5 doors, and like the third one is the easiest one. Then like the fifth one is the second easiest. The first one, like it's all out of order just to try and make you actually learn the game, pay attention to your surroundings, and actually get better, as opposed to just like, I'm gonna play this game and I'll beat it because it's a video game and video games are easy. But yeah, Dark Souls, then I didn't play too much of it really. The only one I put a lot of time into is Bloodborne.
Yeah,
and
we'll
I've been
talk
loving
about that. Yeah, we'll talk
Yeah.
about that in a little bit.
Yeah.
Other 360 PS3 games I think was really difficult was definitely Battlefield 4. Um,
What?
really
Battlefield
difficult to
4?
try and get into a game with your
Oh,
friends,
okay. I was gonna
and
say
a
what the
server
heck?
that was stable enough to actually let you play the game and not kick you consistently.
Right. Yeah.
No, for
That's
completely different reasons, Battlefield 4 was a hard game, and this is
yeah.
more of like the not so good reasons that a game is hard. Because I remember me and Chris trying to play
Right.
this, and it was like, all right, let's scroll down the list. I found a server. It has 18 to 24 people. Let's click on it. All right, we're on different teams. Let's try and switch teams. All right, we can't. Oh, I'm lagging. Too bad. I can't play on this server. Let's leave this server. Let's go find another one. That was like our night in a nutshell. Till eventually we maybe found a server that we only had like 1 second lag on instead of like 2.5 second lag on.
There we go.
But yeah, that's like the
Oh,
bad hard games.
yeah. For hard games, really, like I'm looking at the games on my shelf. Like there really aren't that many hard games
No.
on the 360. But the place where the hard games really kind of came back was like the indie games,
I
like
was
your
about-
Xbox
yeah, I
Live
was in-
Arcade,
yep.
and your
I was
PSN,
about to say that.
and your Steam.
Because this
like,
is the time
I'm
of the indie
thinking-
games.
Yeah, like one of the, and it was on GameCube and I think PS2 and Xbox also. But Alien Hominid was one that I played on the GameCube, and then they released an HD version on the 360 arcade. But that was by the guys at the Behemoth who've done Castle Crashers and Battle Block Theater, who I like a lot. But that was just another throwback to your Mega Man, Contra, Metal Slug kind of games where run and gun platforming. But instead, an incredibly violent, cartoonish game starring an alien who's being chased by the government. And it was a great game. But yeah, the arcade was really where it
Yeah,
came
I mean,
back.
like you think about the arcade, I think of like two games in particularly the past couple years. The AVGN game. Oh my God, is that game hard?
Yeah.
Super Meat Boy. Dear Lord, is that game hard? But
Yep.
neither game is like, once again, it's like the old Mega Man, like we said, Mega Man,
Right.
Castlevania type feel games, to where it's like, the games are hard, but if you die, usually it's your own fault. More so on Super Meat Boy than AVGN. AVGN is just kind of
Right.
ridiculously trolly.
That
like,
game is supposed to be
the way it
annoyingly
is.
hard.
But I
But yeah,
absolutely love it. It's one of my favorite indie games. Like, and I'm not really big into indie games at all, but definitely like when I think of Super Meat Boy, what else? AVGN. There's just like a bunch of like random ones that are like $4 or $5 on Steam. You
Yeah.
can get them on the Xbox Arcade for only a few dollars. I mean, they're not
Yeah.
they're not ridiculously hard, but they're definitely challenging. Again,
Yeah,
back to the old
and-
Nintendo eras.
And there are tons of games. Like you can go on Steam now, and like the new games list is a mile long. But in terms of like actual quality games, like yeah, Super Meat Boy was huge, and I mean they had an entire documentary pretty much about that game. But that game is the one and only game that has caused me to break a controller.
Would you
I
say?
broke my original wireless 360 controller playing that game because I spiked it into the ground. I meant to spike it into the pillow that was sitting on the chair next to me in my dorm, but I missed. It bounced off and it hit the ground, and it cracked the base of the analog stick, so I couldn't use it anymore. But yeah, that game is perfect. Like I have no complaints about that game. And obviously, Edmund McMillan, the guy that made it, went on to make Binding of Isaac, which is one of my favorite games ever.
Yeah.
But Super Meat Boy is so good because it's so hard, but the controls are perfect, and the fact that literally whenever you die, you instantly restart, it makes it
Yeah,
so much better.
You press like
It makes
X or Y or something like that, and you immediately
Yeah.
revive.
Yeah, you press X and you immediately revive, and you can do whatever. Like if you think that you can do a move in that game, you pretty much can. And it all is skill based. Like there's no randomness involved in that game. Like that game is so perfect, and that kind of kickstarted, I feel like, the the whole indie movement
Yeah, it did. It did.
with all these games.
And I feel like that's the way that all the hard games are gonna go. Like, when I think
Yeah,
of like AAA titles, like, I'll just use it like Call of Duty, for example. You got like pretty much the majority of people that are gonna play the campaign of that game, they're gonna play it on normal or easy just to blow through for achievements. But if you play it like on
right.
hard or veteran, the game can get kind of difficult. But
Yeah, but that
it's not so difficult because once again you have a checkpoint like every firefight
right.
pretty much. But there's not many AAA games that are gonna make their games difficult anymore because there's no real market
Right.
for it. There's a market
No.
for it, but I feel like Dark Souls and Bloodborne have taken that market and just captured it in like a little small globe, and they're gonna hold on to it. There's no reason for them
Yeah.
to let it go. There's no reason for another company to try and come in and say like, oh, we want a piece of this pie, and they're gonna give it to them. I
Right,
just
and nobody and those games like Bloodborne and Dark Souls and all that, they sell well for what they are, but they are never going to be top sellers on
yeah
anything.
yeah.
Like you will get your
That's why they kind of
couple
come out.
100,000 sales, but that's they don't market those games very much. They only market them to the hardcore people. Like on some gaming websites, maybe you'll see them, but they don't spend hundreds of millions of dollars like Destiny or Call of Duty or something like that on marketing, and they keep the production costs low. Those games look nice, but they're never going to be, a Battlefield 4 when it came out and it was like the best game that had been
Yeah.
released, or an Order
Best looking,
1886.
best looking
Yeah.
game, not
Yeah,
best
best
game.
looking. Oh no, not best game. But yeah, like those games, and they're realistic about the expectations for the sales of those games. But like, yeah, Call of Duty is never going to be hard. Like the only reason that game is hard is because it literally spawns never-ending waves of enemies at you until you hit the next checkpoint.
Yeah,
And the hard games don't appeal to everybody, and with the cost of video games, it doesn't make sense to make hard games. So yeah, it's going to be a lot of indie ones, a lot of indie games, that are made by 1, 2, 3 people.
yeah. That's where I
that
think
really kind of bring that back.
the future of hard games is going to be. It's going to be the
Yep.
old 8-bit retro games. You're going to have a couple 16-bit, but you're not going to have, like we said, like these AAA titles that are going to be like, hey, buy this game, it only lasts an hour, but it's going to take you
Right.
20 hours to beat because it's so hard.
Yeah, and like the Binding of Isaac was one of my favorite games ever, and it was made by Edmund and a couple other guys, and I bought it for $5 on Steam, and that's not on a Steam sale. Like I've seen that game for like 89 cents on a Steam sale.
I bought it for like $1.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and there's been this whole renaissance on the PC with like roguelike games. So games that are
Yeah.
exceptionally difficult. They're randomly generated parts to it. Like Binding of Isaac was huge. FTL, Faster Than Light, is
Yep.
one of those games, which is another amazing game.
Don't Starve.
And there are just tons of them anymore.
Yeah, Don't Starve is a good one.
Yeah, Don't Starve, all that kind of stuff where, these exceptionally hard games that are cheap, that, only a couple of people made, and then, they're selling them on Steam, and
Yeah, there
they
may
don't have
be-
to pay for distribution and all that. You're just
They maybe
downloading
want
a
to
digital
sell.
game.
They maybe want to sell like if they sell like 5,000 copies, they're doing great.
Yeah,
If they
and
sell, but if they sell 20,000 copies, they're doing amazing. If they sell 100,000, oh my God, that's pretty fantastic. Like watching
Yeah.
the indie game documentary you talked about for Ed McMillan and his partner for Super Meat Boy. Like what
Yeah,
was it?
Tom.
Day one they sold like 250,000, or they
Yep.
were. I can't remember exactly what the number they said, but it was pretty high, and I'm like,
Yeah.
that's pretty impressive.
And I mean,
for
they
that many.
marketed the crap out of that game.
Yeah.
Like, I was all over for the Summer of Arcade and all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
that was part of like their agreement for making it and selling it. It had to be like a certain
Right.
time or something. Like
Yeah,
that.
and then they released it on Steam, and they've made like 10 times the amount of money on
Yeah.
Steam that they made ever on Xbox, because just with the way that Steam works versus Microsoft and all that. But
Yeah, 'cause-
but the hard games are here to stay on the PC, and I
you're
love
not,
it.
yeah, you're not gonna see too many on the console going forward. Like
No.
you'll have your Bloodborne 2, maybe 3, Dark Souls 3 coming out,
Yeah.
but that's like your only fix you're gonna get for a hard game that looks great. Not so
Yes.
much like I'm not saying that because games don't look good, they're not good, or they don't look great, they're not good. The gameplay's still amazing. It's like the old school, like we said before, the old 8-bit, 16-bit. But to close it out, if I had to pick one game that is probably the hardest game I've ever played, I'm gonna have to go back to the Nintendo, and the only game I still haven't beat after like 20 years of playing it is Ninja Gaiden. The first one, I'll eventually
Yeah.
beat it. I hope. What about you, Tom?
Yeah, I would actually, I would agree with you there. Either Ninja Gaiden or a game that I've never beaten. I know you have, but it gave me fits. Was Contra 4 on the DS.
Yes.
That was an amazing throwback to the Contra games of old. But good grief, was it hard, especially with having two screens and having like essentially one big screen, but with like a little an inch of it just gone. Like that was kind of hard. But yeah, those are probably two of the hardest games, especially Ninja Gaiden.
Yeah, Ninja Gaiden was great.
It's ridiculous.
By no means is it a bad game. It's more.
It's amazing.
It's more just the difficulty, but it's great. So,
yes.
Once again, you guys, happy Mother's Day to every mothers out there. Whether it be with children, for children, whatever you want to call it.
We would literally not be here without you.
Yeah, that's true. We would not be here without you.
I made that joke at work, and it went over really well on Saturday.
Well, that's good for you. But thank you guys again, and we'll catch you next time here on Stay Tuned.
See you guys.